Thank you, Saida and Chase. Like Chase mentioned, I'm Zoe. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm a rising second year in the college at UChicago, and I'm a group leader for Discover Chicago Bound. And thank you all for being with us.
Yeah, hi everyone, my name is Fernanda. I'm also a rising second year in the college, and I'm also a group leader for Bound, and so excited to have you all today.
So we have some short bios for each of our panelists that we'd like to read. I'd like to start with Anna Mayer. So Anna Mayer began serving at Tierra de José as an Amate volunteer in August 2011 and joined the staff in June 2012, first as a compañera and later as the program director. Originally from Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, she attended the University of Notre Dame and graduated with a degree in psychology and sociology. Since beginning her work at Tierra de José, she has also completed a master's in nonprofit management from DePaul University School of Public Service. She has served as executive director since 2016. Oh, Fernanda, I think you're muted. Oh, there we go.
Also joining us is Stephanie Alejandra Ortega. Stephanie Alejandra Ortega has served as an immigration specialist at Catholic Charities since June 2019. In this role, Stephanie supports clients seeking family-based and humanitarian-based immigration benefits by providing legal assessments and follow-up legal services. Stephanie also conducts informational presentations throughout Chicago regarding immigration policies, rights, and support services. And Stephanie serves as a client serves clients in both English and Spanish and acts as an in-person English-Spanish interpreter. She attended the University of Chicago and graduated with a BA in Comparative Human Development, specializing in culture and community and comparative race and ethnic studies and Latinx studies. And prior to Stephanie's current role at Catholic Charities, she served the organization as a Metcalf intern on the children's legal team. Stephanie has also worked as an immigrant legal defense intern at the National Immigrant Justice Center and as a Fried public policy and service intern at UChicago. Stephanie is passionate about gender, disability justice, and immigrants' rights, and is a DOJ accredited representative leading Stephanie to provide legal representation before Department of Homeland Security and consulates and embassies abroad.
And I'd also like to introduce Fasika Alem. Fasika Alem is the programs director at United African Organization and has been serving in this role since 2019. Fasika graduated from Knox College with a BA in biology and then went on to complete an MPH and a PhD in public health at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Prior to becoming programs director at UAO, Fasika contributed to UAO as a community-based health research consultant from 2012 to 2014. Fasika has also served as board president of the Ethiopian Community Association of Chicago, as a health researcher with Chicago Public Schools Office of School Health and Wellness, and as the program coordinator for UIC's Department of Family Medicine Medical Education Programs.
And we also have with us Evelyn Venegas. Evelyn Venegas Cuzco is the Family Support Network Coordinator at the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, ICIRR. In her current role, Ms. Venegas oversees the Family Support Network hotline and conducts training and presentations about current immigration issues and policy. Ms. Venegas was born in Quito, Ecuador. She grew up in the north side of Chicago in the neighborhood of Irving Park. Ms. Venegas earned a BA in political science with a focus in urban studies and a minor in anthropology from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Before joining ICIRR, Ms. Venegas served as a youth leader at the Logan Square Neighborhood Association, focusing on immigrant trauma in DACA youth. In her previous role, she also helped pass online voter registration and election day registration while Democracy Court Fellow at Chicago Votes. Ms. Venegas enjoys helping her community in her free time. She volunteers to help legal permanent residents fill out their citizenship application at Erie Neighborhood House.
So again, welcome to all our panelists and thank you all so much for joining us today. To get started with questions, I want to ask kind of a broad question. What do you envision an ideal world to be, especially in the context of immigration, and what role does your work play in getting us there? I guess we can start with whoever is ready. We're hoping to do about 60 minutes for questions from Fernanda and myself, and then open it up to our audience for about 20 minutes after that. So keeping responses somewhere around 3 minutes for each question would be great.
I can start. I gotta say, this was probably the hardest question from the list that you sent us, right? And it really makes you think. So thank you for challenging us in that way. But I guess my first thoughts are, you know, looking at the work that we do, is an ideal world would be one in which there is equity and justice, right? Where we are compassionate towards each other, where we preserve and respect our planet, and where we can all eat, right? And indeed, there is enough for everybody to eat. So I think those are the things that came to mind, and I know that they're very general, but thinking about the work that you do, you know, that we do in this overall ideal world, right? We have, UAO has a significant role, and it may be a small one, but still significant in a lot of ways. So through our work at UAO, we strive to promote social and economic justice and empowerment among African immigrants and refugees in Illinois. And essentially, you know, if you ask us what is the goal of the work that we do, and it's really, the best answer I can give is really to help people live their best lives, right? That's the ultimate goal. It takes different paths, right? But I think most of the other panelists would agree with that the goal is to help people live their best lives. And we recognize that, you know, immigrants chose to come to the United States because of their, you know, countries of origin did not enable that. So, and some under very perilous circumstances, dangerous situations, have managed to come and try to do that here. So our role in that is to help them achieve what they came for, and that is to live their best lives. I'll end here.
I guess kind of jumping off what Fasika said, which was very, very well put. I guess I would add kind of like really that envisionment of a community where everybody has access to protections, to camaraderie, to like mutual aid in all its aspects, not just, you know, in the nonprofit sector providing services, but on like a community level, a like neighborhood level. I really think an ideal world is somewhere where we can have those kinds of processes, and it's not necessary for like survival in the sense of, you know, right now I think a lot of communities that are under attack are really reliant on community building and mutual aid. But ideally, right, we would all be participating in that out of, you know, goodwill and you know, camaraderie, not because it's absolutely necessary for survival. And I think, yeah, the work that we all do is trying to get there. I mean, given the context that we're living in and the political climate that we're living in, it's sometimes hard to envision, at least for me, it's hard to envision like an ideal future, but little by little, we're working towards that through direct service or, you know, management, whatever it is, doing our role.
Going off of that, I think both Fasika and Stephanie had great responses. I think in an ideal world, really maybe having folks who are able to live dignified lives and are able to not just survive, but also thrive and be able to, you know, I think something that is always so interesting is that American dream, right? Because it doesn't look the same for everybody, and it doesn't cost everybody the same either. And I think that's something where community comes into play. I know I come from a very communal oriented family and culture. And for me, like learning through that process has allowed me to be participant of the community that I'm part of now, whether it is fighting immigrant justice or fighting just civil rights overall, right? I think there's so many different communities right now that are under pressure, that are under attack. And I think I've never seen it more clearly now. I think that it's that moment in which we have to find this community within all of our different communities and recognize that, you know, what we really want is for all of our communities to be on the ongoing journey towards liberation, right? For whatever that may look like. But I think the key word now is making sure that we go together, that we go as a community. And, you know, that's what I would want for the immigrant justice community, but that's what I also would want for, you know, Black lives to be able to matter. And that's what I would also want for LGBTQ communities and Native American communities. So, you know, seeing it as just the immigrant rights community, to me, it doesn't make sense anymore. It definitely is that part of, we're all together in this. And now I've seen so many more people come out for protests, come out for actions, ask about what's going on. And to me, I think that's part of our work too, and seeing like it's working in this way. We may not be at that ideal, right, of wanting for liberation for everybody, but we're definitely on those steps of making sure that people are more involved, that people come to the table, that people are participant. And I think we're definitely getting there.
Yes, I would echo what all of my fellow panelists have shared. I think you did a very eloquent job of sharing, I think, a beautiful vision for our future. And I think kind of to build on that idea of, I heard a lot of themes of community and kind of in this process together. And at Taller de José, our model is one of accompaniment. And I really see that as just kind of like a model for how we all live our lives, right? We talk about how we have to accompany one another as staff to then be able to accompany the communities that we serve. And I feel very strongly that while, you know, unfortunately, many of the reasons for our need for accompaniment are rooted in systemic injustices right now, right? People aren't able to access the services that they need when they go to a place alone. So having an advocate with them can sometimes help overcome some of those systemic barriers. But I also just think about the fact that I want someone to accompany me when I'm going into a challenging, difficult situation, right? Even if there isn't a systemic barrier. So I see our work as promoting that sense of community, that sense of walking alongside one another, kind of no matter the circumstances. So.
Thank you so much for sharing, Anna. And that, I think that's a perfect segue into our second question, which is, in this process of trying to build community and working towards liberation and making sure that people are accompanying each other towards their best lives, what are some strategies for building trust within the communities that you serve, especially those that are more vulnerable and have to be more careful given those systemic injustices?
I could take a stab at it first this time, since I had the easy job last time of going last. You know, I think for us at Taller de José, it's a couple of different things. One is just even when I think about physical spaces, right? We're located in a old convent next to a church. It's not some big intimidating government building downtown. You know, it's located in the community where we serve, the zip code where the majority of our clients come from. So just, you know, first of all, being in that space is really important, I think. Obviously, I think having, working to have staff that are bilingual and bicultural, obviously those are really key aspects to building trust. And then I find that it is doing our best to make accommodations to meet our community members where they need to be, right? Whether that is at our office, whether that's at a partner organization where they already feel more comfortable. And then I also see that as even just the way that we message what we do, right? Making sure that everything we put out is bilingual, whether that's on our website, on our social media, on our materials, and being really intentional about the language that we use when we talk about our services, right? So that it isn't othering, so that it is very much about expressing that accompaniment and that model, so that people get right from the get-go, that we hope that people feel very welcome in the space. And I think just being patient, right? People may not tell you on that first visit the thing that's most challenging for them, but if they're willing to share something as a starting point and showing that you are still there, you're listening and you're trusting, and inviting that continued relationship is really key.
I can go. Actually, you gave me, I never thought how not being downtown makes a difference, right? So that's interesting. So, you know, at the core of building trust is really the relationships, right? It's about developing relationships with people so that, and you know, most of us who work in immigration know that it's hard for people to share their stories, right? There's a lot of fear around it, but there's also a lot of trauma around it. So it's a very difficult thing to share. So it's very important to build the relationships that enable that sharing. And so for us, it's somewhat built into our structure. So the way we are structured organizationally is like we are a coalition of African community-based organizations. So by having that structure, I think it makes it easier to share information. So our board is made up of, you know, leaders from these community organizations, most of whom are directly impacted, right? So when we have either services or we're doing advocacy work or organizing, those leaders are you know, how do I put it? They're the ones that are able to reach into their networks, right, and share the information, and then are able to funnel, you know, those that need services back to the organization. So that has been very helpful in developing that trust. Secondly, we have, you know, not everybody that is appointed or elected to be, say, the president of a community-based organization is the connector or the information sharer, right? So we also try to make a point of recruiting these informal leaders that are really good about sharing information and using their networks. And we recruit them to be, we call them our griots. So they're the ones that share information and then refer you know, the most vulnerable back to us so that we can provide, whether it's legal services or other types of services that we need. So that has been really helpful in building the trust, so that when people are reaching out to a particular staff member, they have been referred, you know, somebody telling them, call so-and-so, you know, so they feel, you know, they can trust that this person is going to provide some support. Yeah.
I think going off that, thank you, Anna, for bringing, you know, having an office downtown, because that definitely is it causes, you know, certain folks to not have access to it, for sure, even having, you know, bus fare to get to downtown. But kind of going off of Fasika, you know, ICIRR is also a coalition-based organization. There are, I think, about over 120 member organizations throughout the state of Illinois. So the way that we, you know, do our organizing looks a little bit different, right? We don't necessarily do work with like the community directly. We work with supporting nonprofit organizations that are part of our membership and bringing up their leaders, usually someone on staff or someone who has highlighted someone. And then we kind of create tables in which, if we're planning for a specific action or if we're planning towards a specific project, we bring those folks who are either directly impacted, who are on the ground, who are part of the community, to make sure that that representation is at the table, and that as a coalition, we are able to work together and bringing more folks together, right? And I think one thing that Fasika said, you know, the connector, right? And I think sometimes coalitions are that. They are that part where it's that hub, and maybe other organizations may have specific questions about policy updates, may have specific questions about, you know, ICE in the community. And it's like, where do we get this information to make sure that it is vetted, to make sure that we are not we're not alone either, right? Even by being part of a coalition, we know that there's other folks who have our back, there's other folks who are also able to work with us. And a lot of the partnerships that we have, as well as memberships, are with organizations that are in the community that have already built that trust in that community and are allowing us to say, hey, we have a group of folks who are invested. Let's go to Springfield. Let's, that's kind of how our advocacy looks like. Building up those leaders and making sure that folks are trained enough and understand what policy looks like here in Illinois specifically, and then providing that opportunity to go to lobby in Springfield, talk to elected officials, go to actions. Yeah, I think that was, yeah.
Yeah, so I really loved how all of you mentioned this important aspect of community, and we've been talking about community a lot, but we, like Catholic Charities, we rely on like people referring to us. We also make it, part of our practice is trying to give every client whatever wraparound services that they need, and if we can't provide it within Catholic Charities, reaching out to other organizations, providing referrals like for like mental health services or, family law assistance, or if, deportation support. I think for me personally, working in the legal aspect, a lot of it goes into the kind of like accessible language that we use. It's tough sometimes working in the legal aspect because you are sometimes seen as like the same as I'm talking to the state or I'm talking to immigration. So it's really important for advocates to, establish rapport, hold space for, our clients, story or their experiences, their trauma. A lot of, the work that goes into preparing a legal case for immigration purposes is very re-traumatizing, especially for those who are applying for like U visas or VAWA, which are folks who have suffered crimes or domestic violence or sexual violence. So it's, I think, one of the trickiest things as a representative is to establish that rapport with the client, ensure that they feel supported, that they feel heard, beyond just, what's necessary for the case, but, seeing every person as a person, right? And, providing anything that is needed, like safety planning or, giving like know your rights presentations, like especially in my work, like if I identify someone who might be at higher risk, like I will spend the extra time for the consultation and really let them know what their rights are, give them resources, do all of that. And that is just really important, like not just for building trust, but for like as much as possible, like ensuring that everyone knows, what's within their means to keep safe. Thank you all so much for those responses. As Stephanie mentioned at the beginning of her response, it seems like community is a major theme, interpersonal relationships, building rapport. And that kind of makes me think that there must be some effect that the pandemic has had on the ability to do so. And so I'm wondering if you all could tell us about some of the progress or initiatives you've seen arise during the pandemic and this year in general, and given recent events, how do you envision the future of your work in the organization? I know I framed it to be sort of like a negative thing, like COVID-19 has really taken a lot away, but just any effect that it has had, we'd love to hear about.
Hi, I think I just wanted to start off because I'm actually dealing with this right now, but I would say that, well, for me specifically, I handle a hotline, which is 24/7. So regardless of the pandemic or not, we're still kind of doing the same work of providing referrals, providing follow-up calls. But I think one thing that has been a little bit not as hard to adjust to but also just hard to adjust in the sense of this is happening while a pandemic is happening. We support with, deportation defense. And in the past 2 weeks, we've had a very increased intake of ICE here, not only in Chicago, but in the suburbs and in the state of Illinois. And I think that's kind of where right now it's the harder part, right? Because even though we're in a pandemic, these things are still happening. And in the past, as a team, we would have actually gone to, something happened in a school about 3 weeks ago. And we were able to go and, follow up and see what was happening. That kind of follow-up is a little bit different now because of COVID, right? We do support rapid response teams throughout the state of Illinois, and many of them are cautious right now, right? Because even as a raid is going on, they're seeing not only ICE, but then they're also seeing unmarked vehicles. Are these federal agents, or are these also Homeland Security agents? And in some situations, there's also even local police that support ICE, right? And so now you have this highly policed moment in which many of rapid response team trained people are not prepared for that, right? Because we haven't seen it like that before. Usually it's just ICE, maybe one local agency, but more often than not. But yet many teams were like, okay, this is kind of like a break, right? We're in a pandemic, we're supporting with mutual aid, we're supporting with finance, which is kind of the need of the community right now. And it's a big need, but then on top of that, you have the protection, you have that security of having to also show up to your community when there's ICE being called or when someone is being evicted. And these are moments in which, yes, we can handle them one by one, but when it's all together at the same time, I wish I had a better answer, right? But I think these are the challenges that we are facing. And it's kind of a little bit difficult to even begin to imagine, hey, what can this look like now that it is happening during a pandemic? How do we get people to be comfortable? How do we get them to be trained enough to be able to feel comfortable in these situations? But we don't have an answer yet, right? And we continue to provide Know Your Rights informations. We do continue to answer these hotline calls, but it's definitely not getting any easier. And I wish I had a better answer, but I think that's kind of how the question was, like, what challenges are we also facing? And I think one of those solutions is having these conversations and hearing from others who are also in this work and figuring out, hey, like, what are you all doing? How is it that you all respond? But yeah, kind of just to share a little bit, it's been a lot lately.
And I think, a lot of these issues that we're seeing now existed before COVID, right? But what COVID has done, it's that it has really brought them to the forefront. It's made them worse. Looking at housing, for example, it's been an issue with our communities for a long time, but we know that it's going to be a much bigger issue, as we move forward. But I wanted to highlight two things that have changed for us. One, remote work was a change in itself. A lot of the work that we do is face-to-face, and, as in the past, we've only thought about it as something that happens face-to-face. But I think this COVID has shown us a different way. We struggled as an organization to adjust and kind of learn the technologies that we need in order to continue to engage with our community. But it was also a huge learning curve for our community members, having to, not being able to just walk into the office was huge, but even, trying to send us information, trying to get them to figure out how they can scan it or take pictures and send it, and then being worried about how confidential it is when they send it over the phone. So all of those things have been major adjustments for our legal services. Since it's such a sensitive topic, how do we give them some face-to-face, but remain remote? So Zoom has become everybody's best friend. And our communities have adjusted and have accepted that, okay, this is a good compromise. Like, I can see who I'm talking to. and so when I'm sending, information, they are more at ease. But on the other hand, it is also it's been really good for our community meetings and webinars and things like that. We definitely have much more attendance. I think people are much more comfortable attending these things from the comforts of their homes. So I think moving forward, we're definitely going to continue to incorporate this remote engagement in the work that we do. Probably not for everything, but I think for these events and sharing information, I think we find that people are pretty comfortable with dialing in or going on Zoom to get the information that they need. The second thing that we've seen is that we've seen our most vulnerable community members, the undocumented community members are really coming. For us, they really came out of the shadows because they needed the help so much. We were part of a couple of initiatives that provided financial assistance to those that were not going to qualify for any other form of relief. And I mean, the number of undocumented individuals that have contacted us, I mean, surpasses any amount that we've seen in the past. So, and the sad part is there's never enough money to help. And so, that was a big thing that we saw, that we have a lot more undocumented community members than we had anticipated.
I would very much echo that. I think that the pandemic really has highlighted and brought to the forefront and just exacerbated a lot of the structural issues that have been around for a long time, right? In our community, we've seen just a huge increase in need in financial assistance, in emergency food, and just seeing as well the huge numbers of individuals in the community that have been directly impacted by COVID, and recognizing that it's probably a major undercount just because of how long it took to get enough tests in the community and that sort of thing. So it's been a real double whammy, both the economic impact and then the health impact in the community. So if I try to look for the positive spin, I think we have seen the birth of a number of mutual aid organizations that came together, communities looking to support those within their own communities. We have been lucky to work with some foundations that we facilitated some direct financial assistance for things like rent and utilities and that sort of thing. And a lot of pop-up food pantries and that sort of thing that have developed. But I think then once I think about the future of our work, I think so much of that needs to be about how do we help build resiliency so that in a situation like this, the community has more supports in place, right? That they aren't the ones that are kind of the first to feel the impact in so many ways. So I think that's something I don't have the answers to by any means. And I think that my role is really to be one of listening to community, to learning from others about what that would look like to help provide some of those supports, and what kind of advocacy level changes would need to be done in the spaces of immigration and housing and employment. But I think that those will be the critical pieces in the coming 12 to 24 months.
Yeah, so definitely, a lot of the points that all of y'all have brought up have definitely been challenges for our work as well. I think one of the kind of lesser talked about issues that has arisen with COVID has been specifically the, we think about, okay, well, we can call our clients on the phone, we can do remote work, we can talk to them on Zoom, but for many of the clients that I work with, specifically working with survivors and victims of domestic violence, a lot of them are living with abusers. So right now is a very difficult time for them you know, in all aspects of their life. And that also, you know, makes it difficult for clients who are seeking, you know, legal services, and, you know, previously could, you know, say, oh, I'm going to work, I'm going to the doctor, and, you know, would come to our office. But now, you know, everything's closed, everyone's, you know, largely working from home, for folks who are not in like essential frontline kind of work. So that's been a huge obstacle, but it's also been something that I've really, you know, I think we've grown a lot. You know, speaking of that learning curve, right? We've learned, you know, to just expand the way that we, you know, kind of just reimagining how we see client-facing work and like direct service, which is necessary, you know, during COVID, after, before, it's always been needed. I mean, there's always accessibility concerns. I mean, even in our like physical spaces of our offices, like aren't always accessible, but also for, you know, all the reasons, like, you know, the fact that some of my office personally isn't downtown. So like that's very inaccessible for a lot of folks. So I think one of the positive things that we've learned maybe in COVID, you know, is expanding, you know, not just requiring everybody to do a process one certain way, coming to the office and doing that procedure, but making exceptions, you know, having an alternative for folks so that we can ensure that they get the services that they deserve and need, and also, you know, being conscientious about accessibility, safety, financial, you know, health imperatives.
I just want to say, like, you all are amazing. The fact that you've had to transition during this time and provide those services for your communities, and as you were saying, Stephanie, really to diversify this process is incredible. So thank you all for that work you're doing for the people that need you most. And now that you've mentioned sort of the work that goes on internally within your organizations to really restructure and get these resources out, how are you all affected by more of the external factors, such as policy and legislation? Like, in what ways does that affect your work and how you all operate?
So, I mean, my work has been completely upended. just all sorts of changes have been going on during COVID. I mean, if COVID wasn't enough, we've had a lot of changes with public charge. That's specifically a policy that is affecting folks applying for their residency. And honestly, it just disadvantages a lot of folks. You know, immigration is now requiring an incredible amount of documentation of, you know, health, work history, education, things that were not previously required before. And COVID has kind of, you know, started at the same time that this law was going into place. So we've not yet seen, you know, how it's going to pan out. For the meantime, there's an injunction, so it's not in place fully. But, you know, navigating, I think it's been difficult to navigate that because we're, as legal practitioners, learning, you know, all these new policies, you know, keeping up to date, needing to know our current and future clients, what the changes are, as well as our past clients, because things are changing faster than, you know, like next day kind of stuff. So yeah, that's been very, very difficult to work with. Like, also the fees for a lot of the immigration applications are going up astronomical rates. So all of these things, it's really just rolling with the punches and doing your best to inform as many people as possible, but knowing that you won't get to everybody, and, you know, it's just kind of like one of the terrible parts of this work.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, those, you mentioned some of the policies I had in mind when I was thinking about today's panel too. You know, the public charge rule, you know, has really, you know, created so much fear in our community that even folks that are eligible for benefits and for whom public charge is not an issue are still opting to do without these public benefits. So that becomes, you know, a big problem when, you know, even if you provide the information, there's so much fear. And I think that's part of probably the strategy behind all these policies, is just to create so much uncertainty and really deter people from accessing public benefits or immigration benefits or any of that stuff. The fee increases are also huge, you know, particularly, you know, removing the option to do a fee waiver for those that are low income. So we have a lot of people that will not be able to afford you know, becoming citizens, or it'll take them longer to be citizens. And imagine families that are trying to get citizenship or trying to do, trying to get citizenship for 5 children, right? It becomes impossible. So those are really things that affect our work. Another example for us, and this was pre-COVID, but is the expansion of the travel ban, which, you know, was barring people from certain countries from permanently settling in the United States, now includes 4 African countries. So we have Nigeria, Eritrea, Sudan, and Tanzania that are included in that travel ban. So that has a huge effect for our families here. You know, we have so many people that have spouses and children and parents in their home countries that are now not able to either complete the process they have started or can't even start that process, right? So again, you know, it really comes to the separating families, right? So that creates a lot of issues. Yeah.
I think definitely we had some of the same policies in mind, everyone, right? But I think one thing that I do want to add was DACA. The DACA decision did come during the pandemic, and that in and of itself was a terrible thing that happened, right? Many people thought we're going to be able to have first-time folks apply. A lot of youth right now who may be undocumented, 16 and before, couldn't apply. We're actually sending applications until in July. We got another news saying, you know what, we're not going to accept them anymore. The DACA is going to change. It's not going to be 2 years. It's going to be 1 year. And it was that, right? Those type of policies that we know are being intentfully done to hurt our communities, to discourage them to apply for legal, you know, immigration at this point, right? You are hindered from being confident enough to even apply for adjustment of status because of public charge. And I think one thing that is very, I would say venomous about public charge is that the amount of people that it actually affects is less than the amount of people who are in fear of it. For us specifically in the hotline, we get a lot of calls from LPRs, legal permanent residents, who no longer actually public charge applies to, but they'll say, hey, I'm trying to go to citizenship. I have, you know, WIC, I have SNAP, what am I gonna do? Where do I return this? Well, it's like, hold on, wait a minute. Let me give you the correct information, because first of all, it doesn't affect you, right? And so there's a lot of that misinformation coming from that fear. Why? Because we're seeing all these different policies at the same time. We're seeing DACA, public charge, fees, the People's Academy, TPS ending. So we have a whole, you know, whereas even in the immigrant refugee community, there's, you know, sub-communities, right? And now across the board, all of them are almost being attacked in all these different ways. And then you add the pandemic, where people may have gotten stuck outside of the US. And if you have an LPR, you can't be that long outside until it's considered abandonment, right? And so they put our folks in certain situations that there is just this overwhelming fear, to the point where, like, a lot of people are, you know, whether they were eligible for citizenship, whether they were eligible for the adjustment of status, or even eligible for DACA, are now in a way just, you know, stuck, right? And there isn't necessarily that path. And I know this is very controversial, but there's so many people saying, oh, well, you know, as an immigrant, you should go to the right path. Well, look at the path that they're giving us. There isn't really a good path. There isn't really an attainable way to even do a legal adjustment of status. Why? Because you keep putting ceilings, you keep putting barriers, and it's almost like every year there's a different barrier. Public charge, there's also a twist to it, and it's probably gonna come out soon as well, but that's also gonna heighten the fear. I don't want to speak too much about it because they told me that they don't know exactly what it is yet, but that there is going to be a change with public charge in the next coming months again. So it's just this constant, you know, attack on family, separation of the family. And now with the news of what has been going on in ICE, I'm so sorry, but ICE concentration camps, it just also feels like, hey, like this agenda is not that far off from hate itself. So I think all of the policies together have just created this atmosphere and this moment of such a fear. And honestly, I think that has also made it, I think for us a little bit hard even to contact people sometimes, because they, you know, we have the census going on, you have ICE in the streets, you don't know who to answer your door to, you don't know what exactly to fear, you don't know what exactly is the information. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I feel like I put way too many things out there and not enough positivity. I'm sorry.
No, I think the three of you all did you know, what I was going to speak to is the idea of there are these really practical implications of the policies, right? Of not having the ability to access public benefits or different, making it much more challenging to become a citizen. And then there are the impacts of the fear of the feeling like your community is being attacked, right? And then that has a secondary impact of, you know, where we are working with clients who need to go downtown to the civil courthouse that has nothing to do with like immigration, and yet they're worried about what if ICE is at this is a government building and that sort of thing. So then it means that people are then afraid of accessing all sorts of other services and programs that they really need to. And so it just like the ripple effect is enormous, and it just creates this sense and this message of unwelcome. I think really has been overwhelmingly the message that we've been getting.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And I want to echo what Marisol just put in the chat, which is please don't apologize for speaking the truth, and please don't apologize for feeling passionate about it. These are things that we all should know about, especially those of us who have the privilege to never have to worry about our immigration status, and to not worry about these very harmful policies directly affecting our lives on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for all of your answers. And Evelyn, you actually mentioned the census. And we wanted to ask about that because according to our research, neighborhoods like Little Village and Pilsen, communities who tend to have a large population of undocumented immigrants, are lagging behind in the census count. So I'm wondering if you all could talk a little bit about why that may be, what risks associated with taking the census look like. And that's not just for those two communities, it's not restricted to that. We were just using them as an example. And then are you working to mitigate this fear of the census, or what are the strategies that you're taking?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. We actually are funded by ICIRR, so thank you to Evelyn's team to do census work. There are a number of organizations, I think 40 across the state, that are working to specifically work in immigrant communities. And I think you had again, with everything this year, you had the double whammy, right? So it was communities that are traditionally undercounted because there is concern about filling out a government document, concern about answering the door of somebody who's coming with official badges, language barriers, technology barriers now that everything is online, even just like inconsistent mail, getting all the reminders and everything that they've been sending, which is often inconsistent, plus this whole year, mail has been even worse. So I think you have all of these conditions that were in place before, and so there was a big focus on making sure that these communities got counted, and then they sent all of the census educators and census promoters home. We had to shelter in place, right? So then all of these plans that were in place to go do door knocking, to do outreach to community members, everything had to be reimagined. And even with the extension of it, I think then that just created more confusion, right? The deadline was June 30th, and then it was October, and then it was September, and oh wait, now it might be October again. So you have, I think, all of these different compounding things. So some of what we've been doing, right, is building on those relationships that we have. We're talking with a client who trusts us, and it's a lot easier for us to encourage them to take the census than it is for a random stranger who comes to their door. So making sure that we're doing as much census education with the communities that we're working in, and then I've seen a lot of work too of trying to go where people are. So go to the food pop-ups, go to where they're distributing masks, and using that as an opportunity again for census education and also just completing the census too. So that's a little bit about kind of some of the work that we've been involved in and that we've been seeing happen.
We are also an ICIRR census grantee. But you know, the African immigrant community has always been undercounted in both the census or the American Community Survey, whichever one you think of, we've always been undercounted. And some of that, as Anna mentioned, you know, is the fear of, you know, just before the census, you know, we were doing Know Your Rights training where we were telling folks, don't open your doors. And then a couple months later, we turned around and we're like, oh, you need to do the census, you know, and they may come to your door. So kind of, you know, trying to reconcile those messages and making sure we're telling people, yeah, they may come, but we don't want them to come. So do it, you know, online. And then there's technology barriers. We find that a lot of our community members also don't, it's lack of information, right? They think that it's only for citizens or it's only for residents. So those that are either undocumented or are in the process of adjusting their status, they feel like that's not for them. So they will ignore all messaging around the census. So we've been, you know, before COVID, we were doing more the one-on-one, right? But since then, we've focused more on doing remote work. So we started doing wellness checks, and we coupled those wellness checks with, you know, checking in on people, how they're doing, you know, in this time, what their needs are, and maybe assessing if there are areas that we can support them with, what barriers they're dealing with. So COVID was a good way to start the conversation, and then we'd ask about the census and then try to provide assistance with completing that. And that, so with that, you know, it was mostly, you know, community members that we've had contact with in the past. So in terms of trying to reach those outside of that, I think, again, we've relied on our leaders to share information with their communities. We have relied on our griots and our, you know, trusted messengers to share those messages, but also trying to work with local businesses to share that information. So, you know, for example, we've shared, you know, 50, 60 tote bags with restaurants, for example, and then we'll give them material to share so that when people come and order food, they're giving them, you know, census information. So we've tried all those, and right now we're also doing a number of questionnaire assistance events around the city to try and assist folks with completing the questionnaire. I'll stop there.
Yeah, so Anna's point really, you know, resonated with me, you know, using our trust in the community to inform folks about the census, you know, have them understand, you know, it's for everyone to take, it's not a risk to take, and you know, to Fasika's point about letting people know to do it online before so they don't have folks coming to their door. That's definitely something that I've advised my clients. And I have gotten a lot of questions from clients, you know, asking me, is this for me? Is this going to affect me? And, you know, we have signs around the office, you know, showing giving people information about the census. And that's been that's been, you know, helpful, I think. But really the work that all of y'all are doing with the ICIRR census work, my partner is one of the coordinators of the ICIRR census work, so it's I know that you guys are doing amazing things, and it's really making a difference. You know, even with the clients that I see, a lot of them are like, hey, can I take the census? I saw this event in my community. And it's like, great, yeah, the word is getting out. So it's very important that we all take the census, obviously, and it's even more important to let undercounted communities know that it's to their benefit to participate.
Yeah, so on our end, we were able to work with the state to get funds for census, and we were able to get coordinators such as Mateo, who is one of our coordinators, and be able to support the organizations on the ground. And honestly, I just want to highlight the amazing work from Taller de José, from UAO, from all the other 48 partner organizations who are really out here hustling, whether it's the weekend, whether it's a rainy day, but they're really doing the work. They're really stepping up with their leaders or adjusting to the moment that we are in. And I know that it's not easy, because just as we are seeing our community going through so many things individually, we're all going through so many things, right? So I just would like to say thank you so much for all the amazing work that y'all do. Yeah. I don't know much more that I can add, because y'all are doing an amazing, awesome job.
Yeah, echoing again the gratitude. Thank you so much for everything that you all do. And I just like to encourage the people watching right now to please start compiling those questions and putting them in the chat, because we'll be transitioning to our Q&A session in just a short bit. And I guess our final question, what's one way that we as young people can get involved in some of the work that you do? And what are some of your recommendations, and sort of how did you all get into this work?
So I really liked this question, because I think that in general the legal field is very intimidating to get into, and myself, coming from a like low income first gen background, I never thought that I could, you know, do legal work, and I didn't know what that looked like. And I think if I'm gonna advise anything, it would be to not let the imposter syndrome get to you. Try, just go for opportunities. There's no harm in applying for a job or an internship or a volunteer position, and there's so much to learn. I think, especially given the importance of community, of working together in this work. Everyone is here to help someone out, to teach them about something, to learn something from them. It's I think definitely engage with your community, with your organizations around you, and that's the best way that you're gonna find your way, find your role to take in protecting immigrants and supporting your entire community. For me, like, I had always wanted to work in supporting the immigrant community, but I didn't really know what that role was going to look like, and I applied for volunteering to help people with their citizenship applications through gosh, I can't remember what organization at UChicago, but it really opened my eyes to all the things that we can potentially do in this work, and it's just about finding what your role is, right? Whether it's providing legal services or interpretation or translations, there's so much need, and more likely than not, you can do something that is really gonna make a difference for folks.
I was super excited for this question too, just because we have this really cool texting feature now. But I think one thing that I would suggest all folks, just because it is coming up, is Election Day. We are reminding folks that it is Election Day. And I think one thing, as I was, discussing with some of our team, I was like, what is the need right now, right, that we can shift folks to? And so we are actually holding call centers on the weekends. And so anyone who might be interested in like calling folks, you can text VR 2020 to 52886. VR 2020 52886. You will also, once you get send that text, you'll be subscribed, and every so often you will be getting text messages about any actions that we may be having. We actually did have an action earlier this week at the USCIS office, celebrating and also sharing what is going on at ICE, and and so once you text that number, you will actually be able to get all the updates depending on whether it is an action, whether it is health related, whether it is ICIRR voter registration. But I would definitely say if folks do want to be involved, definitely text that number. And that is, I think, one of the best ways to be engaged right now.
Yeah, since you brought up the September 15th action, I want to go off of that. And I think one of the areas that we definitely support, we need support in, is what we are a small organization. We have a staff of 5. And in addition to providing services, a wide range of services, we do a lot of advocacy and organizing work. So September 15th was the rally in opposition to the Citizens Academy. And, being part of those types of rallies, I think is important for the work that we do. Showing, having critical mass of people to really get the point across, right? That, we as a community are opposing all these, ways in which they're terrorizing our community. So we definitely need support. If anybody's interested in helping us do our organizing work, helping us plan for rallies or actions. Most of the time we do that as part of a larger coalition like ICIRR, but we definitely would love to have young minds that are creative and will help us do that work. Within the office also, we are always in need of volunteers. We're looking for volunteers to help us with census outreach. We're looking with volunteers to help us with citizenship applications. So, and we also take interns, around particular projects. And we always try to make this a learning opportunity for students, where we match our, try to match our needs to the interests of the student. So if you all, you can visit our website. It's uniteafricans.org. And we do have an internship and volunteer application form so that we can get an idea of what your interests and availabilities are. And then, we'll follow that with a conversation, to assess your needs and our needs and match that. So please, yes, please reach out. Thank you.
Yeah, I would echo what a lot of the other panelists said. I think a big part of it is showing up, right? Is finding an organization, work that it piques your interest, that you find passionate, and to continue to show up and to use that as an opportunity to learn as much as possible. I would say, as a white woman who doesn't share the same identity as a lot of the communities that we work into, for people who are maybe in a similar situation, I see my role as really being one of doing a lot more listening than talking, which is ironic given that I'm a panelist speaking today, so I will call that out. But I think that if you are in spaces like that, to continue to interrogate your own privilege, to really think about being intentional about who you are in that space, and how you are listening to others, and finding opportunities to make sure that there are space for others, I guess, would be a critical thing that I think is important. But I think it's about reaching out to those organizations that you connect with and find a passion, and then just seeing how you can show up to be a part of that.
Thank you all so much for your responses. And as Fernanda has said, I want to echo her in saying thank you all so much for the work that you do. And thank you, Evelyn and Fasika, for putting some information in the chat for our attendees as well. And all of these organizations have websites. So everyone who's watching, please visit the websites, look at social media. There's a lot to explore, and I think many ways to get involved. We're going to transition to a Q&A. So we have a question from Yuen. To summarize and paraphrase a bit, it looks like Yuen is asking about immigrant-owned small businesses who are important to the economy, but usually might not always receive the same benefits from the state and the federal government as other small businesses. And may also be ignored or overlooked by policymakers. And Yuan is wondering if you've worked with business owners before, immigrant business owners, and what situations they're facing during COVID and pre-COVID.
We do. During COVID, we're providing webinars and trying to provide information to small businesses about relief programs that were available and how to best access them. And we have a particular relationship with African hair braiding, the African hair braiders community. This is actually the 10-year anniversary of the formation of the Illinois Association of Hair Braiders. I think that's what it's called. 10 years ago, we, UAO was able to organize hair braiders to lobby for policy that would enable them to bypass cosmetology school, because the city was asking them to stop practicing their craft because they were not licensed cosmetologists. Yet this is a skill that is passed down through generations, right? And is critical for a lot of our community members, as a source of income, particularly among our undocumented population. So we were able to do that, and we were able to pass a bill that enabled them to continue practicing. So this is their 10th year. So we have, we've been helping them, plan to celebrate, but also they're doing relicensing and all of that. So so we've been working with them, and what we've been finding with a significant proportion of our small business owners, including the hair braiders, is that they were in no way prepared to apply for the relief programs, right? The application process or the requirements, either they didn't make their annual revenue wasn't enough to qualify. There were some state-based relief programs that required annual incomes of 80,000 and above. And a lot of these small businesses were not making that. So they were automatically, ineligible for some of those. And then for things like the PPE, we've talked to small businesses that are like a mom and pop shop, and it's the family taking turns to staff the store. And so to apply for the PPE, they had to have, employees and a payroll system, but that's just not how moms and pops really function. Not, a lot of them don't do that payroll. They maybe take off some money from the profits that the store makes, but they don't have an established payroll. So it was very difficult for them to access these benefits that some of the larger businesses were better equipped for. So, the goal moving forward is how do we help people or small businesses get their paperwork in order so that if these types of opportunities come, that they can access them. maybe I can ask a question to the rest of my panelists. You know, I know for most of us, it's been go, 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 really since the beginning of the year, right? If it's, you know, COVID is another, you know, another thing, but also these constantly changing policies. If you're not trying to figure out how do you work around, you know, the legal issues with these new policies, it's, you know, you're always organizing and doing advocacy work. So it's been a constant go. How are you guys taking care of yourselves or your staff?
We have off tomorrow. Right? I think what was really helpful for ICIRR is that we started taking Fridays off when we started the pandemic. That changed around summer in response to a lot of things that were happening. But now again, we're shifting back into that where each department is giving like a day off. So that's very helpful, right? But in terms of like, it's been, I think one of the biggest challenges that I had was having to, as Fasika said, go, 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 right? And it honestly feels like we've been working much more than when we were in an office. Because even before, oh, I have a meeting at 1, let me schedule like some prep time before that. But now, you know, I've been sitting here since like 8:30 in the morning and have not really gotten up. But as soon as I hit 5 or 6 when I'm done, I leave my apartment, even if it's for a walk, because I'm also very cautious, obviously, of where I go. But I make it a point to just leave my apartment, even if it is to the, you know, down the street, 3 blocks down. I'm very fortunate that I do live in a, you know, in the north side where there isn't much policing, because I will say I did live in the south side when the pandemic first started, and it was very heavily policed, and it was very discouraging actually to go outside, to be honest. But I'm very grateful that that has changed and that I am able to go outside. And honestly, for me, that has been my peace of mind. On the weekends, I also do try to go on like road trips or camping trips. I've been to Michigan, Wisconsin, and you know, a lot of my family has actually like lost their jobs. But they surprisingly see it in a positive way, right? They're like, you know, there's never been a moment in which I haven't worked, and now I'm not working, and I don't know what that means, but I enjoy it. And, you know, I think it's that reminding myself that that I'm still here, that loved ones are still here, and that we are in this together. And I think even in that sense, I know we've been talking about community, but I felt it a lot more. And even as some things got rough, that feeling, that emotion of not being alone, of having community, of having other people who may be going through similar things, is very helpful for me to remind myself that, hey, like, don't be hard on yourself if I feel sometimes that, oh my gosh, I had so many meetings, I didn't get to this, right? Something that, you know, as my cousins who aren't working, they're like, this is the moment where we're enjoying it. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we're here right now, and we're going to live through it, and we're going to appreciate it, and we're going to make sure that we enjoy it. And I think, you know, going off of that, their motto, that's kind of how I've been handling it too. And checking in with folks a lot. And I just want to say thank you so much, Fasika, for asking this question, because it's as important as all of the work that we're doing, because we, many of us are part of the community that we, you know, protect, that we work for, that we service. And sometimes we forget that, to take care of ourselves too. So yeah.
Yeah, I also really appreciate that question, and I definitely can be much better about thinking about self-care. I feel, yeah, this whole year has been just a whirlwind in terms of like policy changes, legal changes, and just the hardships that our communities are facing. So I think, yeah, part of sustainably doing the work is taking care of ourselves. There's, you know, that saying of, you know, you can't help someone else until you help yourself. You can't put on the mask, you know, on someone else until you do it yourself. And that's something that I'm constantly trying to remind myself You know, especially now that I'm part-time working in the office, part-time remote, especially, I mean, really, no matter where I am, I have to remind myself that I shouldn't be working overtime and I shouldn't, you know, be working outside of the clock. And it's hard to do that, considering how much need and demand there are for services with, you know, all the policy changes that we mentioned earlier. But it's really important to, you know, just respect and establish boundaries where they're needed, you know, providing the services that we all, you know, are passionate about doing, but also taking care of ourselves and, you know, going out to walk. Like, I've been cooking a lot, watching a lot of like Netflix and Hulu with my partners. So, and connecting with people, I've definitely made it more of an intention to, you know, FaceTime with old friends and my family, and you know, just kind of remembering that, you know, we're all going through a difficult time, with everyone with their own different hardships, but you know, we're all in this together is the moral of the story.
I would echo a lot of that, the challenge. And I have found it challenging too in I mean, obviously the inability to get together with almost anybody, but especially as a staff, because I always just felt like there was a real sense of community in supporting one another in the work that we did, and certainly have added more staff meetings, more Zoom connections, but there's nothing quite like sitting down at the lunch table together with people, right? So I don't think I have great answers for how to solve that yet, but have been at least thinking about that and trying to find ways for us to connect and support one another, and kind of creating space for everybody's self-care is going to look different, right? So creating opportunities, but not, you know, requiring everybody to be on a Zoom happy hour or whatever, if that's not your thing, if you've been staring at Zoom for 8 hours straight. So it's a work in progress is probably the best answer.
Thank you all so much for sharing the ways that you're taking care of you. And I'd like to thank Fasika again for asking that question, because it is really important. Because who else are we going to have this work if you aren't taking care of you? We have a couple of questions that came in during this last question. For the sake of time, we're gonna just choose a couple. And if you want to learn more about what these organizations are doing to help out their communities, I encourage all of you to visit their websites or find them on social media. We have information now at our fingertips, so don't be hesitant about doing that research for yourself. I guess the first question, if we have time to answer two, is there any legal protection for the women in ICE detention centers, especially after the news that surrounding hysterectomies?
So I just happened to say I don't feel qualified to answer that, which maybe is, I'm guessing, why we're all being quiet. I just don't have the legal background, unfortunately, to provide any more insight on that.
Yeah, if others feel the same way, that's totally fine. For attendees, I am going to be leading a workshop on reproductive justice next week if you choose to stay in the cohort and engage in programming next week. And I was planning to include information about that specific topic in that workshop, so stay tuned.
I guess then maybe we should transition into our other question, which is, in what ways are you offering support to immigrant families who have lost their loved ones due to COVID-19?
So Catholic Charities actually is assisting with burial services, like providing financial support for those services. And we also have like a hotline number that folks can call for any sort of assistance that they need related to COVID. So yeah, we've been referring. That's an agency-wide program. So our department, we've been referring folks to that as needed, and also providing referrals to, like mental health services and any other community supports. In general, there's a lot of, I know the Center on Halstead and a couple other organizations have special like support groups that they've been making for folks who have been affected by COVID. Either have been sick themselves or have lost someone, and those services have been really, really great for folks who need them. Yeah.
For us, I don't know if we've been, how I don't have any information off the top of my head about that type of assistance, but I do know like some of our communities have this mutual aid set up for these types of situations. So we've heard of, situations where a community member has passed away and the community has used funds within that structure to support the burial. And I know UAOR, we do have some funds that we did a campaign in March to collect these unrestricted funds to help community members with these types of emergencies. So I would expect that if there was an outreach to our office, that would be the type of support that we can provide.
I would say similarly, we don't have kind of a specific program for people impacted in that way, but I do know that a number of the families that we've helped through our financial assistance program, the person who passed away was earning primary income for the household, or again, there were added expenses, just kind of the impact that has financially. But I do think that there's probably a lot more that needs to be done in terms of the emotional support that would go along with that beyond just kind of the financial impact on the families.
Yeah, I think definitely going off of Ana Fasika, we don't specifically have like funds for that specific situation. But I would suggest that I think that emotional support is something that is definitely needed right now. I would suggest that folks reach out to the Coalition for Immigrant Mental Health. That coalition does provide sliding or sometimes free scale therapy support if that is something that is needed. Additionally, I think many, as the other panelists mentioned, mutual aid funds in different areas of Chicago as well as Illinois is also available. I could definitely also provide our hotline number in case folks have other specific questions as well. We do provide referrals to anything and everything that we're able to find in order to support folks.
Thank you all again for your responses. We have just under 5 minutes left, and thank you all so much for staying with us. I know this has been a long panel, especially staring at a computer screen. Forgive my indecisiveness, but I really like both of the questions, the last two questions from the Q&A, so feel free to answer either one. We can have sort of a casual last question. The first one is, do you have any books, podcasts, or other resources that you would recommend to learn more? And just to all attendees, Saida is also copying things into the chat, the websites for all these organizations as well as their social media. And then the second question is, what are you all hopeful about in the future? So again, casual response is welcome to either question.
One thing that makes me hopeful, I don't know if this answers the question directly, is just like the fantastic partners that we have in our work, like my fellow panelists, you know, knowing that there are so many organizations and individuals across the city who are so committed to this work, that are making all sorts of impacts. So that's something that gives me hope, and being parts of communities and being reminded that we're not alone in that work is really huge for me. And I will think on resources and podcasts. Maybe put those in the chat if I think of it.
We didn't get a chance today to really delve into you know, one of the questions I think touched on this, but we didn't get to it, but around the issues of the uniqueness or the challenges for Black immigrants. You know, when we talk about immigration, we often don't hear about Black immigrants. And so in terms of, you know, thinking about the future, you know, it is my hope that, you know, we're included more in the conversation around immigration, that we are able to, you know, show our presence, right, and really be active in the advocacy, you know, advocacy of policies that impact African immigrants, Black immigrants in general. And then in terms of resources, I'm going to share a resource related to that. It's a few reports that were published by the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, which is a national advocacy organization that focuses on not just African immigrants, but those from the Caribbean also. And they have a set of resources that are really well done, you know, and very informative. And I think that would be a good start for anybody. And I don't know if anybody have you all seen, you know, like most of you, I've been on Netflix a lot lately, and I discovered the series called Immigration Nation. Has anybody seen that? It is, I mean, it was intense, and I've only seen 2 episodes, but I would definitely recommend for those that have Netflix to watch that series.
I think I can't think of any resources at the top of my head right now, but yeah, I can definitely share those in the chat if I get a chance. But I think for me, the thing that I'm most hopeful for is continuing again, like a more accessible outreach capacity in all aspects of supporting the immigrant community in Chicago and in general. I think one of the really great things that, you know, now with the age of social media is, you know, we can learn about a lot more and we can act, and, you know, a lot of folks are really taking, you know, putting their efforts into sharing information, you know, sharing petitions, all of that. And I think that until we, you know, realize, you know, our liberatory future, you know, being engaged is going to be really necessary, and having more folks, you know, engaged about, you know, not just their own struggles, but the struggles of others and those who are most vulnerable. That's going to be that's something that I'm hopeful that we're working towards. And